What a great day it has been. So inspiring. Laura Catena said earlier, science preserves culture and heritage. And I think one of the things that's been so amazing today is seeing how much science is now behind everything we've known for a long time. I started to be interested in climate change in 2005, so a long time ago. And I remember calling on producer and asking what they were experiencing, especially after 2003, which was a defining moment in Europe. And there was not much science related to vineyards to explain what was happening, but they could see it in the vineyards. And I remember a producer at the time already telling me the difference in the behavior of young vine and old vine. So it's been a pleasure to see that science is explaining, and that's what we'll talk about today is how can old vines teach us about the future? Because we've been talking a lot about preserving old vineyards, but the reality is that the landscape will change. So as much as we want to preserve some of those old vineyards, some of the wine regions might not continue to produce down the road. In March 2024, it was the first time that there was a publication, a study, published in Nature Reviews Earth and Environment, and it was the first time a study combined 150 studies. And what that study showed is that if we reach plus 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, 90% of the wine regions in Europe, coastal, southern region in Europe, and also California, will not be able to produce quality wine anymore. So that's quite a scary fact. What they're proposing is that we go to altitude, we go to northern region. I do believe, though, that we're resilient and we'll find ways to adapt. I also believe that we need to find as much as information as we can to adapt, and old vine is part of this. So today what we'll look at is how can old vine help us understand what we need to do so that they can be more resilient to extreme climate events, also pests and disease that are increasing everywhere, also when it comes to water scarcity. We'll talk about the economic because we cannot be sustainable if you cannot invest in sustainability. And we'll also discuss what measures are needed to be sustainable in the future when you're planting also a young vineyard and you're learning from old vineyards. So to discuss this with me, I have an amazing panel. So to my left, Dr. Luis Diaz-Garcia, welcome. Dr. Luis Diaz-Garcia is the leader of the breeding program at UC Davis. Is the assistant professor in viticulture and enology. Then we have Stuart Spencer, executive director of the Lodi Winegrape Commission. He represents 750 growers, so he will have a lot to do to talk about profit, for the challenge of profitability. Then we have Caine Thompson, head of sustainability at O'Neill's Vintners and Distillers. O'Neill's Vintners, I've been admiring for a long time what you do because you've converted a big acreage on regenerative agriculture, and you have amazing data to share with us today. And at the end, we have Andrea Farinetti, whose family, they purchased Borgogno in 2007, and he became the winemaker in 2010, and they now ventured in 12 different regions in Italy, and Andrea is quite passionate about climate adaptation. So, Luis, I would like to start with you. Your work is to develop climate resilient and disease resilience rootstock and also grape varieties. What have you learned from old vines that you are using in your day-to-day work when you're looking at creating grapes and rootstock?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm a geneticist and I am also a breeder. So my work at UC Davis is to develop new grape varieties that are resilient to environmental stresses, so pests and diseases, periods of drought. We develop also new root stocks that are resistant to salinity or more tolerant to salinity, that are resistant to pathogens in the soil. And, one main area in my work is to look into the grapevine genome. So this allows to do breeding more efficiently. Breeding for grape varieties takes a lot of time, 20 years, 30 years, even, more than that. So by looking into the grapevine genome, we can develop breeding techniques that allow us to develop varieties faster. So I'm always interested in the genome. And you might think like, what's the relationship between the genome and old vines and heritage vineyards? Well, there are a lot of very cool things about these old vines from the genetics perspective, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So for the ones that don't know about the genome and genetics and all of that, think about the genome as a book. This book has something like 500 million letters. So if you print this book, you have something like 500,000 pages. And in this book, we have all the instructions to develop a vine, basically. Each variety will have a different book. And this book has 19 chapters because grapevines have 19 chromosomes. Humans have 23, so 23 chapters in the human book. In the case of grapes, we have 19. And this book cannot be changed. So it doesn't matter if you have a young vine, a Zinfandel vine that you just planted last year, versus a vine that you planted 200 years ago, the same vine, the same clone, is exactly the same book. That's a scientific fact. There is nothing different about those two vines, even though they were planted 200 years difference, different age. However, there are two layers of diversity that we can measure, that we can see, and those things are very interesting and very useful. Some of you maybe have heard about something called epigenetic marks. These are some sort of, think about sticky notes that you put into this book, or notes in the margin of the pages that do not affect the content of the book, but they emphasize certain aspects of the book. For example, you may have a sticky note or highlighted sentence with a note that says, read this sentence louder, or emphasize this word, or don't mention this. So you can change a little bit the meaning of the book by doing that. And these changes occur in response to the environment. So if you have a vine that has been in the field for 100 years, these vines have seen everything. They have added a lot of different sticky notes and bookmarks on this genome book. And now we have a vine that has a bunch of experiences, right, that have been accumulated over time. And that's very useful for breeding and just for scientific curiosity. And then the other aspect that is very important about these vines, and it relates to the genome, is that there is another source of variation, and these are just mutations that happen randomly in the genome. Some random letters change in this book. Those changes occur spontaneously, randomly. They might be negative. They may have a negative effect, a positive effect, a neutral effect. Most of the times, they don't have any effect, so you don't see anything. If you have 1,000 vines and an acre of Zinfandel, all the vines supposedly are the same, but in reality, they are all different. It's just that we cannot see all those changes. It's going to be a little amount of those changes that will have maybe a positive effect, and those are going to be the ones that we want to select. So again, two different types of diversity that we can have in this type of heritage vines, old vineyards, that are very useful for scientific curiosity, just for research. But for me as a breeder, that I'm always looking for diversity. Those are, it's a reservoir or genetic diversity that could be super useful. Yeah.
I have another question for you. There's a lot of talk right now about developing new resistant grapes. Lots of money also being put into those research. Mm-hmm. We know right now, according to the IIV, that we have 6,000 different grapes in the world. 33 grapes cover a third of the world's vineyard, and 13 cover 1/3 of the world vineyard. So we were not very imaginative. We planted a lot of the same grapes everywhere. Do you think that we're putting the money in the right place, investing in those grapes rather than looking at the story of all vines and also the genetic diversity with what we already have?
So I think, I want to keep my job, so, you know, but I also, you know, my work is developing new varieties, but also I'm aware, you are aware of, that new varieties are difficult to sell. Nobody wants to drink wine of a variety that nobody knows, even though the variety might have high quality and disease resistance and everything else. It can be the perfect variety, but, you know, just because of the fact that there is a new variety, it comes with a lot of limitations. Well, we have clonal diversity, right, that we can use. We don't, you know, if we have something that is disease resistance or has a new color or a new aroma or a new characteristic, higher yield, etc., we can just maintain the name. And so, you know, clonal diversity, clonal variation is also very relevant for breeding. And I think, I'm not saying we should do one or the other. I think we can do both. You know, those are, yeah.
Thank you. I think you'll keep your job. I think there's a lot of it's a great segue to move to Andrea. Andrea, you're champion old vine, but I also know when it's time to plant new vines, you like to do massal selection from old vines to plant new vines, which is quite interesting because there's lots of diseases also in your part of the world in Piemonte, especially with Nebbiolo. Rosa Kruger would tell you can't do massal selection if vines have diseases. So you are pro massal selection. Why do you like massal selection, even with the viruses that are in your vineyards, not yours, but in general in Piemonte?
So thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you very much for the invitation and the Old Vine Conference. Sorry for my English. I'm Italian, don't speak very well, but usually when I don't know a word in English, cut the last vocal, put one S, and usually works also for Spanish, English, everything. So, no, I like massal selection. I like to try to continue to use our historical vines and clone, because I don't want to lose our biodiversity. Italy is probably the most biggest country with the hugest and big biodiversity. We speak about 1,200 different varieties, just only in Italy, 500 different appellations. So to create it and do the right concept of terroir, it's important to have best condition of climate, soil, exposition, everything, but also the old genetics. So try to preserve these in our old vines, but sometimes some old vines dead and you have a new piece of land, or you have a piece of land, new piece of land. And so try to replant this is important. Also for don't make like a concept of a flat wine, standard wine, etc. Because if you analyze the clone, for example, the Nebbiolo, in the last 30, 40 years, just only 20 different clones are selected, and just only the best plant, the best tree, and everything. At the end, the wine is really, really similar. So have the capacity to preserve this. It's for me, it's really, really important. Also because we work with minimum 3 different biotype, really historical, Michele, Ampia, and Rosé.
Do you want to show the slide?
How many in this room knows the Nebbiolo? This is one grapes of Nebbiolo in a completely different whole clone and variety. It's called Rosé. It's completely different in attach. Also, during the vinification, it's really particular. Our Canubi, for example, have 20% of this type of Nebbiolo. It's completely different compared what you can buy from the nursery today, like VRC or others. And so this is why we like to try to preserve the old clones and old vines. And we do also some other experiment on this.
We've talked together about something that you've been experimenting quietly because it's not allowed in Europe, but there's a lot of talk about it. When I've talked to a lot of nursery in France about it, and they want it to be legal, is massal selection on rootstock.
So in Italy,
you're quietly doing some experiments. Can you tell us about it?
Legal experiment. So in Italy, if you make a request from an entities controlled by the government, this project, you can buy the nursery, and then you control the virosis on, etc., and you can try to rebuild it. So it's incredible because we have a really small plot planted in 2021, and we have seen the reduction on the hydric stress, also in a very difficult harvest and vintage, but absolutely we have seen a reduction of some pathologies like Maldellesca or Flavescenza dorata. I don't know in English.
Flavescence dorée.
Okay. E Maldellesca is it in English?
Esca.
Esca. Okay, similar. And is incredible. So also we in 2017 we have the first huge problem of cecity. And also depression, highest temperature is the first time where the ESCA is manifested a lot. So from 2017 to today, we study in all our hectares the development of this kind of pathology, ESCA and Flavescenza and others. And we have seen in all old vines or replanted muscle selection, and from 21 also the new one, the percentage of the pathology in old vines or muscle selection is less than 1%, and in the case of other implantation with the new clone and with etc., it's from 7 to 13. Depends if you are on the top of the hill is 7, if you are in humid part down the hill, etc., it's 13%. In 6 years, you lost your plot, your vines.
Are you able to explain why? Like, is it related to how much carbohydrate there is in the vine? Is it related to pruning? Like, can you relate that much difference?
I think the capacity to the clone to adapt after 100 years, 80 years to the geologic area, to the climate, and other things. So this is one of the solution, I think, the idea, but we have looked this.
Thank you. Caine, I want to go to you because you've done amazing research in your vineyard. You've converted a large acreage to regenerative agriculture. You are now a certified rock. And you also really work closely with the growers you work with to make sure that they are aiming towards that direction. And you've done some experiment and some studies showing the difference on how much resistance a vine is to disease. We know that disease pressure are increasing everywhere with climate change. Can you share some of those data that shows the difference between young vines and old vines when it comes to diseases?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the invite, and it's a pleasure to be here. Just a little bit of context from an O'Neill Vintners perspective. We have vineyards in California, Washington. We've got about 220 growers across 15,000 acres in California, about 4,000 acres up in Washington as well, and about 1,000 acres of company vineyards. Two of those vineyards, about 200 acres, are regenerative organic certified at our Robert Hall winery and Ramsgate. And then this year we converted 2,500 acres of grower vineyards into certified regenerative. So one of the trials that we have down in Paso Robles, we've got vine ages right from 4 years old through to vines that are 50, 60 years old. And so what we've been doing down there is comparing and contrasting regenerative farming and its impact on quality, adaptation to climate, adaptation to heat, and analyzing those results over the last 5 years. And generally, when we look at that trial and we look at what we see across California, is that generally speaking, if you take all the variables out in regards to vine health, and that's a big piece that we need to look at, one of the biggest impacts on adaptation to climate change is how healthy an old vine is. Is it free from leaf roll virus type 3, which is the biggest cause of vine decline that there is, and you take all that out, without question, the older vines are better adapted to climate spikes comparatively to young vines. They're generally bigger, stronger canopies, presuming the vine is healthy, free from all those viruses and diseases vines can get. They're sequestering more carbon, and we know that because we've got carbon sequestration sensors in the soil. We've also got carbon sensors in the canopy that directly show us that. Obviously, how these vineyards were set up, the roots are down further comparatively to the young vine. The density is lower as well, so the vine has been able to just get better established generally compared to younger vines. And so they just perform better in periods of climate extremes. So in this trial down in Paso Robles, out of 4 out of 5 years, they've just been more resilient. So the fruit has been preserved better. Our yields are actually better comparatively because the vine has got this big canopy that goes up over the fruit. It kind of protects it like an umbrella. We're using about 30% less water in the older vines comparatively to the young as well. So there's a lot of benefits to old vines if we can get them there. And some of the benefits and get them there in terms of health, productivity being the biggest barrier to getting a vine there. Because you've got to do a lot of work in regards to roguing, monitoring the virus, keeping the vine clean to ensure it can actually get there to be resilient. But it's certainly very, very positive impact on vine age, on quality, and then also resilience as well.
You mentioned something about water. Drought is something that's impacting many of the regions. I know that you've seen it in Piemonte, and it's been something that's been going on for a long time in California. I'd like to hear each of you maybe talk about your experience with drought and old vine versus young vine and the way they react. Andrea, do you want to start?
Okay. So it's different. You speak about CCT, no? You speak about the CCT, siccità. So no dry vintage, no.
Drought, like years that you have drought and not as much water.
Waters, yes.
Where you're,
so,
especially because you have vineyards in 12 different regions in Italy.
If we speak about Piedmont, for example, if you speak about 2017 or 2022, where usually in Piedmont we have more or less around, in Barolo area, we have more or less around 900 milliliter water per year. And in 17, it's close to 600, and 22 more or less, it's the same. We have in the new plantation means from 95, we have at the 98 or also 2015, the percentage of mortality from 17 in the others to 2 years, or 22 in the other 2 years is really, really high. In the old vines, it's completely less. The old vines have this capacity to regulate the production, and maybe for stay life can also don't produce a grape. So I have the data about the 2017. The production it's around 60% only, and in 2022 it's 29%. Okay, but we don't have mortality. The roots, it's much more deeper in the soil, and the tree have this capacity. And then the Nebbiolo is particular because the old clone is not every year so productive. Some year is less, some year is higher, and have this capacity to regulate it. What we have seen, incredible for me in the wine, when the wine is ready, is in the tasting. So the comparison in between the new clone with the new Woodstock, like if you have a Gravesac, it's go down, plus other, etc. In the touch in the tannins is really, really rustic and really, really dry, like the vintage. And in the old vines, the tannins stay really, really soft and compact. So it's also a question of quality after you can find in the wine.
And when you look at the spec sheet, because I know you have a book of all the spec sheets, it's quite amazing. It has a book that's kept all of the specs of all the vintages. When you look at the pH, the alcohol of a vineyard with old vine versus young vine, in those extreme years of heat, what do you see?
So, for example, in 2020, the wine we have today, if we compare Carnubi list with Fossati, Fossati is where we have a new implantation from 98 comparing Carnubi. It's older. List is from 46, for example, 1946. The pH more or less in 2020 in the wine is around 3.45. In Fossati is 0.10 up, so 352, 354. And the alcohol more or less is similar, don't change so much, probably one line less, but it's not so important. In the acidity also 0.2, 0.3 is up in Carnubi and Liste compared to Fossati. Also, if Fossati is the most highest vineyard we have it, because Carnubi is totally south, totally sunny, 270 meter. Liste is southeast. It's the 370, 420 is Fossati. The highest is highest in alcohol, low in acidity, and different pH.
That's really telling.
Yeah. Also, the soil are completely different, but we can explain through the old vines.
Stuart, I'm interested because you have under your umbrella 750 growers. You've seen some droughts. How are people managing that?
Well,
with old vines and versus young vine, do you see an advantage?
I think, when we see the drought year, so in California you'll have, several years of drought conditions, and then you have really wet winters. Honestly, our old vines are much happier after the wet winters and show a lot more health. And when we have successive years of drought, we're seeing more vine mortality within our old vine vineyards.
More mortality in old vines.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But keep in mind, most of the vineyards are irrigated, and the trellised vines and younger vineyards, have a lot more drip irrigation, more precise irrigation.
Versus old vines that are not irrigated.
Yeah, some of the older vineyards, well, most of them probably have some form of irrigation in, but it's not as precise. So it could be furrow irrigation, or it could be some form of drip that was put in, but it's not as precise as it is on the younger developed vineyards.
Would you think it would be the same result if you start all over again and a vine gets to get old, but you rethink the way you do things and you choose different rootstock and perhaps the grape with no irrigation? Would you think that you have the same result, or it really depends on what you did from the start?
Well, I think when you're developing a vineyard from the start, it's going to make all the difference in how you do it and how it's rootstocks that are put in and how it's being grown. And when I'm looking at old vines, most of ours are own rooted vines, which is a little different than a vine on rootstock.
What about you, Caine? I know that the average of your vine is about 30 years old, so just starting at what we are thinking of as old vine, but you work with a lot of growers that have older vine. Are you experimenting the same thing that Stuart is saying, where old vineyards unirrigated have more mortality?
Yeah, I think when we look at our old vines, they're ripening later than our younger vines. So when we go through periods of extreme heat during that September, October period, the younger vines, they're more exposed to that issue of extreme heat comparatively to the older vines. They're a little behind in that cycle. And I think a lot of that has to do with clonal selection. A lot of the older vines are some of the kind of traditional clones. And as we searched for higher alcohol generally back like 30 years ago, we would look to other clones from Ontave that were, for example, ripening earlier, bringing the season forward. And so now you see some of those vines, they're ripening right in the peak of the heat, whereas some of the older clones are ripening later into the fall. And so as a result, that combined with the age, the root depth, they become more resilient. And if you layer in regenerative farming on top of that, so minimal tillage, full cover crop, you're starting to lower the vineyard temperatures, and that has a macro impact on resilience. I mean, we've found through keeping permanent cover through the vineyard all year round, our soil temperatures can be 20 to 30 degrees lower comparatively to where you've got like a full till uncovered soil. So it's a big difference in the heat and then the resilience of that vineyard as a result.
I'm so glad you say that. And, you know, when we're all here talking amongst us, I think we're all aware of the techniques that you need to do for a vineyard to be more resilient. But I was in Crete last year, and a month later I was in Riora, and we were doing a presentation on cover crop and organic matter in the soil. And I was shocked to see a lineup of producers afterwards asking questions. And for them, they were still in that mindset that if you have bare soil, it's the way to go because they won't compete with the vine. And, you know, we talked about how we can be resilient and how we can preserve those old vine. Yes, we have to communicate to consumer, but I honestly think that we need to share that knowledge with the small growers that is on that corner and doesn't come to that conference, doesn't have that awareness, but may have an old vine vineyard and needs to know what to do to get there, because I think we take it for granted. And I'm telling you, right now, there's a lot of people who don't know what to do to make their vineyard more resilient for the long term. So what you just said is very key. I would like to ask each of us, and a lot of those techniques have been, or practices have been shared already today, but I know you have all different views. If we plant a new vineyard today and we want the vineyard to get old, because we know that old vineyards and growing vine old is the most sustainable way to be, what would be the key things for you to put in place? And I would like to start with you, Luis. I know that you breed rootstock, and when you look in different countries, it's always astonishing that the same rootstock are used over and over again, and sometimes people don't even know why. It's just the way things have been doing, or they just do the rootstock that another famous region were using. Do you think that rootstock and developing more rootstock is part of the solution to make sure that a vineyard gets old and is sustainable?
I'll keep it short. We have 5 minutes. But when I teach about rootstocks, I would say, you know, we always use the three same species, Vitis, Riperia, Rupestris, and Berlandieri, even though in North America we have like 30-something species, many of which are very resilient against salinity and viruses and nematodes and other things. There are many difficulties associated with those species, but definitely we can use them. We can cross them with things that we know work well. But yeah, definitely that's something we need to do, expand the genetic foundation of rootstocks. Yeah.
Stuart?
I think if we're looking at developing new vineyards, we got to look at our grapevine supply system, and we've seen a lot of diseased vines coming out of our nurseries over the last decades. In California, vineyard plantings work in spurts, and everyone gets in a hurry to plant vineyards in the ground, and we've seen a lot of problems with the spread of disease through that. And I think along those lines, we really need to be concerned with biosecurity, because we're seeing a lot of invasive pests coming in that are spreading leaf roll 3 virus, which is a vine mealybug, and who knows what the spotted lanternfly is going to do once it shows up in California, and who knows what that next pest is. So we really need to be resilient about doing those things.
Caine?
Yeah, 2 things. I would say a very, very robust leaf roll virus management program, both on reds and on whites from day one, identifying, roguing, removal, and being unapologetic about it. It's the only way we're going to get healthy vine age to 100, 200-year-old vines, and then layer in regenerative farming on top of that.
Andrea?
For say something different, first find the right place where put a new vineyard, because it's not common, and usually you can see vineyard planted everywhere, and maybe it's not correct. Second, work really well the soil before put the vineyard, not really fast. maybe 2 year, 3 year minimum, okay? And then try to restabilize the organic substance and some other things and work on the soil. Analyze the soil, looks what you have, and then you decide clone and other things, and then you plant it. And to preserve, pruning is one of the secrets, for sure. Have the same end, same vision every year, and then continue to work on the soil for all the rest of the life of the vines.
Before we end, I know we've discussed the economic and how we can make the most of the old vines and be sustainable, but Stuart, I know you have a lot to say about this. I really want to give you time to discuss this. How can we said it at the opening, you cannot be sustainable, you cannot invest in sustainability if you're not profitable. Currently, it's an issue. I know South Africa has done an amazing job, but honestly, I was just in Itata 2 weeks ago. Yes, there are a few famous producers doing well, but the reality, a lot of the growers, they're under the pressures because you have big companies like Connoisseur who come in and they want to buy the grapes at a point where it's like 60 pesos a kilo. So it is not sustainable, they are starving, and that is not just in Itata, it's in many parts of the world. Stuart, what is the solution according to you?
Well, I don't know if I have the solution, but I'll give you my thoughts. I think we spend a lot of time talking about sustainability, and we spend a lot of time talking about community and fair trade, but I think we're missing a big piece of that puzzle, and that is how we are treating our farmers. We talk a lot about how the farmer treats their workers, but we don't talk about how the wine companies are treating their farmers. In California, we are 80% independent grape growers, and in my region, it's probably well over 90%. And the large wine companies comprise about 70% of the U.S. wine market here. We have old vines, 100-year-old vineyards going without a home, while the largest wine companies are importing millions of gallons of cheap foreign wine from overseas. It's being subsidized by our federal government. And then our grocery stores, you'll walk into it and you'll see that same imported wine in a box or bottle right in front of our grape growers who are shopping in those stores. So I think we really, as an industry, need to be looking at the whole as an economic ecosystem across the world and seeing how we balance supply and demand globally so that the farmer actually has some leverage in the conversation and isn't just left, taking what is given to him, because they are just takers. They're at the end of the food chain. And I was just looking at the numbers quickly here. We are looking at probably a 2.5 million ton crop this year in California, down from 4.2 million tons in 2018. That's a 40% reduction in our crop, and that's a generous estimate of where we will be. So we really need to be looking at this on a community-wide basis and looking at it, how we are treating our neighbors and how we are working within our community so that we all are part of this profitable and sustainable industry going forward, because right now it's broken.
Thank you so much. Caine, yes. Caine, I know that you have some evidence that when you do certain things, it can help get more money for the wines you sell. Can you discuss that a little bit with us?
Yeah, I can mention the way we've been farming down in Paso Robles. Now that we've got our estate down there, 140 acres into regenerative organic farming certified. All of that fruit now, this Cabernet Sauvignon and Sauvignon Blanc is going into specifically a Whole Foods program across all stores. We've been able to increase our bottle price with that program, introduce a whole new tier, and increase the economic profitability, not only the vineyard, but from a wine company perspective as well, which has been a great case study. It's an open case study to the industry to see those wines will go into Whole Foods at $30 a bottle for the Paso Robles Cabernet and Sauvignon Blanc. It's going to be hitting shelves on April Earth Day launch in 2026. And from a grape growing price, the transfer of that fruit value into the winery now is about a 40% difference in value that we've been able to get from this conversion into regenerative organic farming. So we're really optimistic about the future of regenerative farming. We believe we're tapping into this macro trend, not in wine, but in the wider agriculture. And it's this massive opportunity for the wine industry. We believe it's going to aid in vine health and longevity, and it's giving us access to a new customer that we haven't been talking to before. So we're expanding that program. We're expanding it into our growers this coming harvest. We're taking everyone on the step into regenerative farming, and we're providing that support to help them get there.
Thank you. I want to add to that also. There's been a lot of discussion today about reaching the young consumers, and the young consumers, they like events, they like experience, they like the story, but they also very sensitive to sustainability. So I think what you need to add to the story of old wine, which not everyone associates it to, is if you have the old wine story that tells you a story about a place, and you link that to sustainability, I really think it's a way to get to the younger generation and get them interested in drinking wine, but also in drinking your wine, because I think you're coupling two things together. There's been studying done by multiple firms, including Wine Intelligence, and it showed that younger generation, they don't care so much about the grape or the place. They want an experiment, and they want an experience, and they're willing to experiment. And they're willing to pay up to $5 more per bottle if they know it's sustainable. And in fact, sustainability resonates more with them than organic, biodynamic, natural, because they feel that sustainability is holistic. It's a whole approach that includes employees, it includes everything. So I really think that we need to get that message out there that having old vine is the most sustainable way to farm. So I want to thank everyone on this panel for sharing your knowledge. It's been incredible. And I want to thank the Old Vine Conference for having me. For those of you who are interested, in January, there's a conference, Tasting Climate Change in January, and the Old Vine Conference will be doing a masterclass, and we will be continuing the discussion on climate change and old wine. So thank you so much, everyone.